The shuttle descended through thick purple clouds and broke into clear sky. Below, the capital city of the Valanthy Empire spread out like a jewel made of glass and silver. Towers reached toward the heavens, their surfaces catching the light of 3 distant suns. Rivers of light flowed between buildings, carrying small transport pods filled with citizens going about their daily lives. Commander Jake Brennan sat alone in the passenger cabin, watching through the small window as this alien world revealed itself. He had seen many planets during his years of service, but the Valanthy homeworld was something different. It was old. It was powerful. And its people had ruled these stars for thousands of years, before humans had even learned to make fire. The shuttle touched down on a landing platform made of white stone. Jake stood up, adjusted his uniform, and walked to the exit ramp. He carried no weapons. He wore no armor. His orders had been very clear. This was a mission of peace, and he would present himself as a man of peace. The doors opened, and warm air rushed into the cabin. It smelled sweet, like flowers he could not name. Jake stepped out onto the platform and took his first breath of Valanthy air. A group of officials waited for him at the edge of the platform. They were tall beings, standing almost 7 feet in height. Their skin was silver blue, smooth and shining in the sunlight. Their eyes were large and violet, set in faces that seemed both beautiful and cold. They wore flowing robes of white and gold, and they looked at Jake the way someone might look at an insect that had crawled onto their dinner table. One of them stepped forward. He was older than the others, with lines on his face and a golden chain around his neck that marked him as someone important. "You are the human representative," the official said. It was not a question. "Commander Jake Brennan of Earth." Jake replied, keeping his voice calm and respectful. "I thank the Valanthy Empire for this opportunity to discuss matters of mutual benefit." The official's eyes moved up and down, examining Jake from head to toe. There was no warmth in that gaze, no welcome. "You will follow us," the official said, turning away without waiting for a response. "The Queen has granted you an audience. Do not waste her time." Jake fell into step behind the group, saying nothing. He had expected this kind of reception. Earth was a newcomer to galactic politics. Humanity had only discovered faster than light travel 60 years ago. And in that short time, they had expanded rapidly across dozens of star systems. This growth had caught the attention of the older civilizations, and not all of that attention was friendly. The Valanthy Empire was one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. They controlled 3 star systems, commanded fleets of thousands of ships, and had technology that humans were still struggling to understand. They had agreed to this meeting only because Earth controlled access to a valuable trade route, and the Valanthy needed that route to move their goods efficiently. But needing something and respecting the people who had it were 2 very different things. The group walked through corridors of polished stone and crystal. Servants stopped their work to stare at Jake as he passed. Some whispered to each other in their musical language. Others simply watched with expressions of curiosity or disgust. Jake kept his eyes forward and his face neutral. He was used to being stared at. He was used to being judged. They reached a massive doorway carved with images of Valanthy history. Warriors in ancient armor. Ships sailing through the stars. Queens and kings sitting on thrones of light. The doors swung open silently, and Jake stepped into the throne room of the Valanthy Empire. It was the largest indoor space he had ever seen. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top, drifting lazily in the controlled atmosphere. Columns of living crystal lined the walls, pulsing with soft light. And at the far end of the room, on a throne that seemed to be made of captured starlight, sat Queen Seraphine. She was magnificent. Even Jake, who had trained himself to show no emotion in diplomatic situations, felt a moment of awe. The Queen was tall even by Valanthy standards, and her silver-blue skin was marked with patterns of gold that showed her royal bloodline. Her violet eyes watched Jake approach with an intelligence that seemed to see everything. Jake stopped at the proper distance and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am honored to stand before you. Earth sends its greetings and its hope for friendship between our peoples." Queen Seraphine studied him for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was like music, but there was steel beneath its beauty. "Commander Brennan, Earth sends a military officer to negotiate trade agreements. Some might see this as an insult, or as a sign of how seriously we take this opportunity," Jake replied carefully. "I am here because my government trusts me to represent our interests with honor. I hope to prove worthy of that trust." The Queen's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "We shall see. You will remain in the palace during negotiations. Quarters have been prepared for you. My advisors will begin discussions tomorrow." She waved her hand in dismissal, but before Jake could bow and withdraw, a new voice cut through the air. "Mother, surely you are not serious." Jake turned to see a young Valanthe female descending a staircase at the side of the throne room. She was dressed in robes of deep purple trimmed with gold, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. Her violet eyes fixed on Jake, with open contempt. "Princess Liara," Queen Seraphine said, and there was a warning in her tone. "We have discussed this." "You discussed?" Liara replied, reaching the floor and walking toward Jake. "I simply listened to words I could not believe. You are allowing this creature to stay in our palace, to walk our halls, to breathe our air?" She stopped directly in front of Jake, so close that he could smell the perfume she wore. It was probably worth more than everything he owned. "Look at it," Liara said, addressing the court but keeping her eyes on Jake. "So small, so fragile. Its species has barely learned to walk among the stars, and already it thinks itself worthy of treating with the Valanthe Empire." Jake said nothing. He kept his expression calm, and his hands relaxed at his sides. "Does it not speak?" Liara asked mockingly. "Perhaps its primitive brain cannot process our language quickly enough." "I speak when I have something worth saying," Jake replied quietly. "Your Highness." Liara's eyes widened slightly at the response, then narrowed with anger. She had expected him to cower. She had expected him to apologize. She had not expected quiet dignity. Bold words from a representative of a species that nearly destroyed its own planet before escaping into space, she said. "Tell me, human, do your people still fight wars over invisible lines on maps? Do you still kill each other over which invisible god to worship?" "And we have made many mistakes," Jake admitted. "We continue to make them, but we learn from them. That is how we grow." "Growth?" Liara laughed, and the sound was sharp and cruel. "You call your fumbling expansion growth? You stumble from star to star, like children lost in the dark, claiming territory you cannot hold, and making enemies you cannot fight." Queen Seraphine rose from her throne. "Liara, enough." But the princess was not finished. She leaned closer to Jake, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire room. "Enjoy your time in the palace, human. I will make certain it is memorable." She turned and walked away, her robes flowing behind her like waves of purple water. Jake watched her go, his face still showing nothing. Queen Seraphine approached him, and for a moment, something like sympathy flickered in her ancient eyes. "My daughter is young," she said. "She does not yet understand the full complexity of galactic politics. Youth often mistakes cruelty for strength," Jake replied. "I take no offense, Your Majesty." The Queen studied him for a long moment, as if seeing something she had not expected to find. "Perhaps there is more to humans than I have been told," she murmured. "We shall see. Commander Brennan. We shall see." The first week in the Valanthe Palace taught Jake many things about patience. His quarters were beautiful. The bed was soft. The food was excellent. And the view from his window showed gardens filled with flowers that glowed in the dark. But every time he stepped outside his room, he felt the weight of hostile eyes upon him. Princess Liara had made good on her promise. She was everywhere, it seemed. At every meal, at every meeting, at every moment when Jake thought he might have a peaceful hour. And she never missed an opportunity to remind everyone that he was an unwelcome guest. On the second day, Jake attended a formal breakfast with the Trade Council. He had barely sat down when Liara entered the room, followed by a group of young nobles who laughed at everything she said. "Oh look," she announced loudly. "The human is trying to use utensils. Someone should tell it that we do not eat with our hands here." Jake calmly picked up the correct fork and continued eating. He had studied Valanthi customs for months before this mission. He knew their table manners better than some of the nobles in the room. Liara frowned when her joke failed to land. She sat down across from him and spent the entire meal making comments about human eating habits, human fashion, and human intelligence. The other nobles laughed politely, but some of them looked uncomfortable. They could see that Jake was not rising to the bait, and that made the princess's behavior seem childish rather than clever. On the third day, Jake presented Earth's initial trade proposal to the council. It was a fair offer. Earth would grant the Valanthi Empire priority access to the transit route through human space. In return, the Empire would share certain mining technologies and allow human merchants to operate in Valanthi markets. He had just finished explaining the benefits when Liara interrupted. "This is absurd," she declared. "You offer us access to routes we could simply take if we wished. Your tiny fleet could not stop a single Valanthi warship. What makes you think you have anything of value to negotiate with?" Jake remained calm. "With respect, Your Highness, war is expensive. The route we control would require fighting through 4-star systems to reach by force. Negotiation costs nothing but time and goodwill." "Goodwill," Liara repeated, as if the word tasted bad in her mouth. "You speak of goodwill while your species breeds like insects and spreads across the galaxy like a disease." One of the older council members cleared his throat. "Princess, perhaps we should allow the discussion to continue without interruption." Liara shot him a look of pure venom but said nothing more. The meeting continued, but Jake noticed that she spent the entire time staring at him with barely concealed hatred. On the 5th day, things got worse. Jake was walking through the palace gardens, enjoying a rare moment of peace. The flowers were beautiful, their petals opening and closing in patterns that seemed almost like breathing. Small creatures that looked like a cross between birds and butterflies flew between the blooms, singing songs in frequencies just at the edge of human hearing. He was admiring a particularly large flower when he heard voices approaching. Before he could move, Liara appeared around a corner, accompanied by 3 of her personal guards and a group of young nobles. Well, she said, stopping in front of him. "The human is enjoying our gardens. Tell me, do you have anything this beautiful on your dirty little world, or has your species already poisoned all the flowers?" "Earth has many beautiful places," Jake replied evenly. "Different from this, but beautiful in their own way." "I doubt that." Liara walked a slow circle around him, like a predator examining prey. "I have read about your planet. Human, polluted air, poisoned water, cities that look like scars on the land. Your species destroys everything it touches." "We have made mistakes," Jake admitted. "We are working to fix them. Too little, too late." Liara stopped in front of him, her violet eyes bright with malice. "Do you know what I think, human? I think Earth sent you here because you are disposable. They knew how we would treat you, and they sent you anyway because they do not care what happens to you." Jake felt a flash of anger in his chest, but he pushed it down. He had dealt with bullies before. He knew that showing emotion was exactly what Liara wanted. "Earth sent me because they trust me to do what is best for both our peoples," he said quietly. "Even when that means enduring unpleasantness." Liara's eyes narrowed. "You think you are clever, do you? You think your calm face and your careful words make you superior? Let me tell you something. Human, you are nothing. Your species is nothing. You exist because the elder races have not yet decided to wipe you out." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "And when we do decide, there will be no negotiation, no trade agreements, no second chances. Your worlds will burn, and your species will be forgotten, and the galaxy will be cleaner for your absence." Jake looked directly into her eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Are you finished, Your Highness?" he asked calmly. Liara stepped back as if she had been struck. She had expected fear. She had expected anger. She had not expected this quiet, unshakable composure. "I have a proposal," she said suddenly, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "A demonstration of the natural superiority of the Valanthi people. A simple combat trial." The nobles behind her murmured with excitement. Jake remained still. "My personal guard, Corvath, is the finest warrior in the palace," Liara continued. "He has won 17 consecutive tournaments. He has never been defeated. I propose that you face him in a sparring match." "To what purpose?" Jake asked. "To settle the question once and for all." Liara smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "If your species is truly worthy of standing among the stars, surely one of your warriors can face one of ours. Unless, of course, you are afraid." Jake studied her for a long moment. He could refuse. He probably should refuse. This was clearly a trap designed to humiliate him and damage the negotiations. But he could also see something else in Liara's eyes. Beneath the contempt and the arrogance, there was something that looked almost like desperation. She needed to prove that humans were inferior. She needed it for reasons that Jake did not yet understand. "Very well," he said quietly. "I accept your challenge." Liara's smile widened. "Excellent. Tomorrow evening, in the grand arena, the entire court will be invited to watch." She turned to leave, then paused, and looked back over her shoulder. "Try not to die too quickly, human. I want everyone to see what happens when your kind forgets its place." She swept away with her followers, leaving Jake alone in the garden. He stood there for a long time, watching the flowers breathe and the bird butterflies sing. Then, he slowly removed his jacket and began to stretch. He had not fought anyone in 3 years. But before he became a diplomat, before he became a commander, he had been something else. Something that the Valanthi had never seen. Something that Liara would learn about tomorrow evening. Jake smiled to himself and continued to stretch. His muscles remembered the old movements, even if his mind had tried to forget them. Tomorrow would be interesting. Tomorrow, Princess Liara would learn why Earth had sent him, of all people, to negotiate with an empire that had ruled the stars for 1,000 years. And she would learn it the hard way. The grand arena of the Valanthi Palace had not been used for actual combat in over 200 years. It was a relic of older times, when disputes between noble houses were settled with blades rather than words. The stone floor was worn smooth by centuries of feet, and the walls were covered with carvings that showed ancient warriors locked in eternal battle. Tonight, for the first time in living memory, the arena would see blood again. Word of the challenge had spread through the palace like fire through dry grass. By the time evening arrived, every seat in the arena was filled. Nobles sat in the high galleries, their expensive clothes glittering in the light of floating crystals. Servants crowded the lower levels, craning their necks to see. Even the queen's advisors had come, their faces showing a mixture of concern and curiosity. Princess Liara sat in the royal box, a satisfied smile on her face. This was her moment of triumph. She had arranged everything perfectly. After tonight, no one would question the superiority of the Valanthi people. After tonight, the human delegation would return to Earth in shame, and the treaty would be dead. The crowd fell silent as a door opened on one side of the arena. Corvath stepped through, and a wave of cheers greeted him. He was enormous, even by Valanthi standards, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with muscles that rippled beneath his silver-blue skin. He wore ceremonial armor that covered his chest and shoulders, and in his hand he carried a curved blade that hummed with energy. Corvath raised his blade high, and the crowd roared its approval. He had been the palace champion for 12 years. He had broken bones and spilled blood in dozens of matches. He had never lost. The cheering died down as the opposite door opened. Jake Brennan walked into the arena, and the silence that followed was thick with disbelief. He wore no armor. He carried no weapon. He was dressed in simple training clothes, loose pants, and a plain shirt that left his arms bare. He looked small and fragile compared to the mountain of muscle standing across from him. Someone in the crowd laughed. Others joined in. Soon, the entire arena was filled with mocking laughter. Liara clapped her hands in delight. "Look at it," she called out. "It does not even know enough to bring a weapon. Perhaps we should give it a stick to defend itself." More laughter. Jake ignored it all. He walked to the center of the arena and stopped, his hands hanging loose at his sides. His eyes were fixed on Korvath, studying the way the champion moved, the way he held his blade, the way he balanced his weight. An official stepped forward to announce the rules. "This is a demonstration of skill, not a fight to the death. The match ends when one combatant yields or is unable to continue. Lethal force is forbidden." He looked at Jake with something like pity. "Does the human challenger understand these rules?" "I understand," Jake said. "Does the challenger require a weapon?" "No." A fresh wave of laughter swept through the crowd. Korvath himself smiled, showing teeth that were slightly pointed. "You have courage, little human. I will try to make this quick." The official retreated to the edge of the arena. "Begin." Korvath did not waste time. He moved forward with speed that seemed impossible for someone his size, his blade cutting through the air in a horizontal arc that would have cut Jake in half. Jake was not there. He had stepped to the side at the last possible moment, so close that the energy blade passed within inches of his chest. Before Korvath could recover, Jake's hand shot out and struck the champion's wrist with a sharp, precise blow. Korvath grunted in surprise. His fingers spasmed, and his grip on the blade loosened for just a moment. That moment was all Jake needed. He moved like water. His body flowed around Korvath's massive form, avoiding a backhand strike, ducking under a kick, always staying just outside the champion's reach. The crowd's laughter faded into confused silence. This was not what they had expected. This was not what anyone had expected. Korvath roared and launched a furious combination of attacks. His blade sang through the air, leaving trails of light behind it. Any one of those strikes would have ended the fight instantly. None of them connected. Jake moved through the storm of violence like a ghost. He seemed to know where Korvath's blade would be before Korvath himself knew. Every attack found empty air. Every lunge met nothing but shadow. "Stand still," Korvath growled, frustration evident in his voice. "Fight me like a warrior." "I am fighting you," Jake replied calmly. "You simply cannot see it." He stepped inside Korvath's guard, so close that the blade was useless. His elbow drove into the champion's solar plexus with perfect precision. Korvath doubled over, gasping for breath. Before he could recover, Jake's palm struck his chin, snapping his head back. Then a leg sweep, perfectly timed, sent the giant crashing to the stone floor. The blade clattered away across the arena. Korvath lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling, trying to understand what had just happened. Jake stood over him, not even breathing hard. "Yield," Jake said quietly. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The arena was so silent that you could have heard a feather fall. Then Korvath did something that no one had ever seen him do. He laughed. It started as a chuckle and grew into a full, genuine laugh of appreciation. "I yield," he said. "I yield to a better warrior." Jake offered his hand. Korvath took it, and Jake helped him to his feet. The champion was unsteady for a moment, but when he found his balance, he clasped Jake's hand firmly. "You have studied our fighting styles," Korvath said, wonder in his voice. "You knew every move I would make before I made it." "Your techniques are excellent," Jake replied. "But you announce your strikes with your shoulders. A smaller opponent can use that against you. Will you teach me to see this?" Jake nodded. "If you wish." Korvath smiled, and this time there was no threat in it. "Then, I am honored to have lost to you, Commander Brennan." The arena remained silent. The nobles in the high galleries looked at each other in confusion. The servants in the lower levels stared with wide eyes. No one knew how to react to what they had just witnessed. Princess Liara's face had gone pale. She gripped the arms of her chair so tightly that her knuckles were white. This was not possible. This was not supposed to happen. The human was supposed to be humiliated. The human was supposed to prove that his species was weak and inferior. Instead, he had defeated the greatest warrior in the palace without taking a single hit. He had done it with empty hands, and now he was standing in the arena, offering to teach his opponent, as if the whole thing had been nothing more than a friendly exercise. "This proves nothing," Liara called out, her voice shrill. "He used tricks. Deception. This is not true combat." Jake looked up at her. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. "Every form of combat uses deception, Your Highness," he said. "The strong deceive themselves into thinking strength is enough. The weak deceive the strong into underestimating them. Victory belongs to whoever sees the truth most clearly." He bowed to the royal box, a gesture of perfect respect. "I thank the princess for this opportunity to demonstrate what humanity can offer in a partnership of equals." Then he turned and walked out of the arena, leaving behind a room full of people who were just beginning to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated humanity. They had underestimated Jake Brennan. And somewhere in the palace, watching everything through hidden cameras, Queen Seraphine smiled to herself and began to reconsider everything she thought she knew about the strange little species from the edge of the galaxy. The morning after the fight, Liara refused to leave her chambers. She had not slept. She had spent the entire night pacing back and forth across her room, replaying the scene in the arena over and over in her mind. The human should have lost. The human should have been broken and bleeding on the floor. Instead, he had made Korvath look like a clumsy child. And he had done it without even trying hard. Her servants knocked on the door several times. She sent them away. Her advisors requested audiences. She ignored them. When one of her guards informed her that Commander Brennan had requested a private meeting to discuss the future of negotiations, she threw a crystal vase at the door and screamed at him to leave. She was still standing among the shattered pieces of crystal when her mother entered without knocking. Queen Seraphine looked at the mess on the floor, then at her daughter. And her expression showed nothing but disappointment. "Clean yourself up," the queen said. "We have matters to discuss." "I will not meet with that human," Liara spat. "I will not apologize. I will not pretend that what happened last night changes anything. You will do exactly as I tell you." The queen's voice was cold and sharp. "You have embarrassed this house enough. Now you will learn the truth about the situation you have created, and you will understand just how much danger your foolishness has put us in." Liara opened her mouth to argue. But something in her mother's eyes stopped her. She had seen her mother angry before. She had seen her disappointed. But she had never seen her afraid. "What truth?" Liara asked quietly. "Come with me." The queen turned and walked out of the room. Liara hesitated for a moment, then followed. They walked through corridors that Liara had known since childhood, past paintings of ancestors and displays of ancient weapons. But today, everything looked different. The servants they passed bowed deeply to the queen, and when they looked at Liara, there was something new in their eyes. Something that might have been pity. They reached a door that Liara had never been allowed to enter. It was the entrance to the Royal Intelligence Chamber, where the Queen received secret reports from across the Empire. Only the highest officials were permitted inside. The door opened at the Queen's touch, and they stepped into a room filled with floating displays and humming computers. Officers in gray uniforms worked at stations around the edges, analyzing data from 1,000 different sources. When they saw the Queen enter, they all rose and bowed. "Leave us," the Queen commanded. The officers filed out without a word. When the door closed behind them, Queen Seraphine waved her hand, and a large holographic display appeared in the center of the room. "Tell me what you see," the Queen said. Liara looked at the display. It showed a star map of the region of space between Valanthi territory and Earth. Small dots of light represented ships, stations, and communication relays. "Our border," Liara said. "The human transit route. Nothing special." "Look more closely." The Queen made a gesture, and the display zoomed in on a section of space just outside Valanthi territory. What Liara saw made her blood run cold. Ships, dozens of ships, human ships, they hung in formation at the edge of sensor range, barely visible to Valanthi tracking systems. They were warships, bristling with weapons. At the center of the formation was a massive vessel, larger than anything Liara had ever seen. Its hull was black, marked with the insignia of Earth's military. "That is the Fortitude," Queen Seraphine said. "Flagship of Earth's 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. 47 warships. 300,000 military personnel. Enough firepower to reduce our homeworld to ash." Liara stared at the display. "How long have they been there?" "They arrived 3 days before Commander Brennan landed on our planet. They have been waiting there ever since, at the very edge of our detection range." "Waiting for what?" The Queen looked at her daughter with eyes that seemed suddenly very old. "Waiting for orders. His orders." She made another gesture, and Commander Brennan's profile appeared on the display. It showed his military record, his training history, his combat experience. It showed a list of commendations and medals that stretched across the screen, and at the top, in large letters, it showed his official title: Fleet Commander, 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, United Earth Military. "He is not a diplomat," Liara whispered. "He is exactly what he appears to be," the Queen replied. "A military commander with enough power to destroy us. He came here alone, unarmed, as a gesture of peace. He could have come with his fleet. He could have demanded whatever he wanted at gunpoint. Instead, he asked for negotiations." Liara felt dizzy. She reached out to steady herself against a console. "And she began. "You insulted him, mocked him, questioned his intelligence, his honor, and the worth of his entire species. You challenged him to combat in front of the entire court, hoping to humiliate him." The Queen's voice was like ice. "You poked a sleeping dragon, daughter, and you did not even know it was a dragon. Why did you not tell me?" Liara demanded. "Why did you let me make a fool of myself?" "Because you would not have listened." The Queen turned to face her directly. "You never listen. You assume that because you are a princess, because you are Volanthi, because you have lived your entire life in luxury and power, that you understand how the universe works. You do not." She walked around the display, pointing at different sections of space. "Humanity is young, yes. They have only been among the stars for 60 years. But in that time, they have done what no other species has ever done. They have expanded faster than anyone thought possible. They have adapted to environments that would kill other races. They have fought wars against species that should have destroyed them, and they have won." The Queen stopped and looked at her daughter. "Do you know why they have won, Liara?" "Because they do not give up. Because when you beat them down, they get back up. Because when you tell them something is impossible, they find a way to do it anyway. They are stubborn and aggressive, and sometimes cruel. But they are also capable of incredible kindness and sacrifice." She gestured at the image of Commander Brennan. "That man sat through a week of your abuse without complaint. He endured insults that would have driven any Volanthi to challenge you to a duel to the death. And when you finally pushed him into combat, he defeated our champion without causing serious injury, and then offered to teach him." "I thought I was protecting our empire," Liara said weakly. "I thought I was showing strength." "You were showing fear," the Queen replied. "Fear of something different. Fear of something you did not understand. And fear, daughter, is the opposite of strength." The door to the chamber opened, and an officer stepped inside. "Your Majesty," he said, "Commander Brennan is in the throne room. He has requested an audience with both you and the princess." The Queen nodded. "Tell him we will be there shortly." The officer bowed and left. Queen Seraphine turned to Liara one last time. "You have a choice now, daughter. You can continue to hate and fear what you do not understand, or you can learn. Commander Brennan has offered to continue negotiations despite everything you have done. That is not weakness. That is strength that you cannot even comprehend." She walked toward the door. "Come. It is time for you to face the consequences of your actions." Liara stood alone in the intelligence chamber for a long moment, staring at the image of the human fleet hanging in space like a silent promise of destruction. Then she took a deep breath and followed her mother to the throne room, where the man she had tried so hard to destroy was waiting patiently to offer her people a second chance. The throne room was empty except for Commander Brennan. He stood near one of the great windows, looking out at the city below. The light of the three suns painted his face in shades of gold and amber, and for a moment, Liara saw him not as an enemy or a victim, but simply as a person far from home, carrying a weight that few others could understand. He turned when he heard them enter. His expression was calm and open, showing no anger, no resentment, no desire for revenge. He simply bowed respectfully to the Queen, and then, to Liara's surprise, to her as well. "Your Majesty, Your Highness, thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Queen Seraphine ascended to her throne but did not sit. She stood beside it, one hand resting on its arm, and looked down at the human who had every right to demand their surrender. "Commander Brennan, I believe you are aware that my daughter now understands the full nature of your position." "I assumed as much, Your Majesty. And yet, you requested this meeting rather than pressing your advantage. Why?" Jake was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I came here to build something, not to destroy it. Earth does not want war with the Valanthi Empire. We want trade. We want cooperation. We want to learn from you and share what we have learned." He paused. "The fleet at your border is there for protection, not intimidation. I hoped that by coming alone, I could show that we mean you no harm. And yet harm was done to you," the Queen said. "My daughter treated you with contempt. She mocked your people. She tried to humiliate you in front of the entire court." "Yes," Jake nodded slowly. "She did." Liara felt her face burn with shame. She had been so certain that she was right. So certain that humans were nothing but primitive savages who needed to be put in their place. Now she stood in the presence of a man who could have destroyed everything she loved and chose not to. "I want to understand something," she said suddenly. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. Nothing like the confident cruelty she had displayed before. "In the arena, after you defeated Korvath, you offered to teach him. Why?" Jake turned to face her directly. "Because he is a good warrior who wants to be better. Because there is no shame in losing to someone who fights differently than you do. And because I believe that people can learn from each other, even when they start as enemies. Even after everything I said to you, words are just words, Your Highness. Actions matter more." He took a step toward her. "You called my people primitive. You said we destroy everything we touch. You told me that the galaxy would be better off without us." Liara flinched at hearing her own words repeated back to her. "All of those things have been said about us before," Jake continued. "By our own people, sometimes. We have done terrible things in our history. We have made mistakes that cost millions of lives, but we have also climbed out of the darkness, again and again. We have faced extinction and survived. We have built things worth building and created beauty worth preserving." He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes and the faint scars on his hands. "I did not come here to prove that humans are superior to the Valanthi. I came here to prove that we can be partners. Different, yes, but equal. Working together toward goals that neither of us could achieve alone." Liara felt something crack inside her. Something hard and cold that had been there so long she had forgotten it existed. It was fear, she realized. Fear of change, fear of losing her place in a universe that was suddenly much larger and more complicated than she had ever imagined. "I owe you an apology," she said. The words came hard, but they came. "Not because of your ships, not because of what you could do to us. Because I was wrong. I judged you without knowing you. I hated you without reason. That is not worthy of a princess of the Valanthi Empire." Jake studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Apology accepted, Your Highness. Please." Liara shook her head. "After everything I have done, please do not call me that. My name is Liara, then you must call me Jake." They stood there in the golden light of the alien suns, and something passed between them that was stronger than anger or fear or pride. It was the beginning of understanding. Queen Seraphine watched from her throne, and for the first time in many years, she felt hope for the future. "Well then," she said, It seems we have a treaty to negotiate. And perhaps, when the formal talks are complete, we might discuss other matters. Cultural exchanges, military cooperation, the possibility of young people from both our worlds learning about each other. She looked at her daughter. Liara has much to learn about the universe beyond our borders. Perhaps, Commander, you might recommend someone who could serve as a guide. Jake glanced at Liara, then back at the Queen. I might know a few people, Your Majesty. And if it would be acceptable, I would be happy to continue serving as Earth's representative here. I have developed a certain fondness for this world. Despite everything, perhaps because of everything. Jake smiled again. The most valuable things in life are rarely easy. Easy would be boring. Hey, the negotiations that followed were complex and sometimes difficult, but they were never hostile. Over the following weeks, Jake and the Valanthi Council worked out a treaty that benefited both peoples. Trade routes were opened. Technologies were shared. The first human merchants arrived in Valanthi space, and the first Valanthi scholars traveled to Earth. But the most important change was smaller and harder to measure. Liara spent many hours with Jake, learning about Earth and its people. She read their literature and studied their history. She listened to their music and watched their films, and slowly, she began to see that the species she had dismissed as primitive had a richness and depth that rivaled any civilization in the galaxy. On the day Jake finally left to return to his fleet, Liara walked with him to the landing platform. Will you come back? She asked. As often as I can. He paused at the door of the shuttle. You know, there is an old saying on Earth. It goes something like this. The measure of a person is not how they treat those weaker than themselves. It is how they respond when they discover they were wrong. Liara nodded slowly. I will remember that. I know you will. He offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. You are going to be a great queen someday, Liara, not despite what happened here, but because of it. You learned something that most people never learn. You learned how to change. The shuttle door closed. Engines hummed to life. And Liara stood on the platform, watching as the small ship rose into the purple sky and vanished into the clouds. She stood there for a long time, thinking about everything she had learned, about strength and weakness, about pride and humility, about the strange little species from the edge of the galaxy that had taught her more in a few weeks than she had learned in a lifetime. Then she turned and walked back into the palace, ready to begin the hard work of becoming the leader her people deserved. In the years that followed, the alliance between Earth and the Valanthi Empire became the foundation of a new era of galactic cooperation. Other species joined the partnership. Trade flourished, wars were prevented, and when historians wrote about the beginning of this golden age, they always mentioned the human commander who could have conquered an empire, but chose to build a friendship instead. They mentioned the princess who had taunted him, and they mentioned the moment when she learned that true power is not measured in ships or weapons, but in the wisdom to choose peace when war would be easier. That was the gift humanity gave to the stars. And it was only the beginning.